Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. Just was kind of getting a little bit of an audio rig set up here.
Nice. I like your fuzzy thing there.
Yeah, it's pretty funky. It's like a Ear Trumpet Labs microphone. It's pretty interesting. It's kind of like all made out of these like steampunky like plumbing pieces, And
Looked all hairy like it had a wig on.
exactly, but it's cool. Yeah, I like the little hat they give it.
I like the hat. Yeah,
Everybody warm.
it's a hi-fi situation. Everybody has to have one.
hmm
It's also looks like a mop. You recognize your machine up there?
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. So, yeah, that actually that ended up with Brad Bensko, who runs Bearded Cat Productions down in Mystic, Connecticut, and I believe
Fantastic.
he may have been a student of yours at Berkeley at one stage.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Seems like everybody was now.
totally. Yeah, he was a guitar principal and audio engineer, and his studio is like mostly analog. And when I was trying to rehome the machine, I was thinking of where it might be the right place. We're like, I don't have enough space. So so I went to the next person I could think of, which is Brad, and he's also like an audio tech. So it's really good because
He can fix it.
you can fix it.
So he knew how to work it all before he even bought one.
Exactly.
Wow. So
Yeah.
he must be really happy with it.
Yeah, and I know he had a has MCI JH110, which is the stereo mix down deck, quarter-inch machine, and it
Oh,
uses the
cool.
same cards. Like I guess one cool thing about the MCI JH series tape machines from that era, they all utilize like the same internal cards and logic boards and stuff. So
Wow.
yeah, so interestingly, like if you've worked on one, now you just need to scale that to 24 tracks.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so
That's great.
I went to a great place, but glad that you
It
have
just
that picture.
I'm glad I have the picture too. It's a lot easy to maintain
Mm.
and,
Yeah.
keep working perfectly. I look at it nearly every day and love it and sort of wish for it every day, but,
Yeah.
it's like I'm not even using my 1 inch enough, So it's like when I had a half-inch machine, it didn't matter to me how often I rewound it and fast forwarded and worked on things and made tracks and bounced things and did whatever I was doing. I never even thought about, hey, you're wearing out the tape. But now I'm like, ooh, you're wearing out the tape. Practice everything with your logic files and then print it or just print through it, like that kind of thing and go through once or whatever. And really, you can do anything. There's plenty of tape and it's no big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think for what it is, it's another great like production tool. So if you're feeling inspired and want to lay something down, then why not? Because
Yeah.
otherwise, you might do the three practice runs using your logic files, and then you might lose a bit of the spark. What do you prioritize in that situation? I'd say use the tape machine. Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. What I love about working straight to logic, though, is like compared to the old days when I would just write a song and put it on a little cassette deck, like one of those dinky little machines.
Mhm. Yeah.
uh, I have hundreds and hundreds of cassettes that are demos of songs that I've only played once that I haven't even released yet,
Yeah.
you know? And now when I start something on Logic, I can finish it and turn it into a finished record.
Right.
You
I
know?
mean, you can effectively like release it to the masses same day if you wanted to.
Yeah, you could do that too. So it has come a long way, hasn't it?
Here's a question for you.
All
Uh,
right.
well, and also you invite me on your podcast. I'm just going to spin this and ask you all the questions. But when was the last time you went through some of those cassettes and maybe dug through to see if there was any gold or anything that you might want to develop more into an idea? Because I know that you're someone that writes a lot of music as well. So uh,
Yeah.
have you kind of combed through any of that? And,
Oh, yeah. Every time I put out another record and every time I'm working on one, which is kind of every year, all the time,
Mhm.
But I recently even cleaned out that whole back space that was just filled with things that were important and not important and got rid of the chaff and went through every tape box and then put them in different places. Now I'm going to go down even deeper and organize which songs are what. But I've pulled out songs over the years and released songs, redid them,
Mhm.
you know, actually recorded them for real. Like one of the first ones I dug far back on was one of the ones you played on, For Another Star.
Yeah.
And I did a whole new demo so that it could actually be the tracks to play to. And we did it on that machine.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool.
That was fun.
Do you
So
find
yeah, pretty often I go through those because it's like, where is that? And what year was it? Where was I living? And what could I have taped it on? And which machine was I working with? And it's like, oh no, I only have a cassette. Or no, those got digitized to the VHSs. And no, that's not probably on CD now. And no, I think you still only have a reel of that. It's really crazy.
I mean, the good news is living in the digital age, we don't encounter the problem of the storage element as much because thankfully all our mediums or they've been stored on the same medium for the past like 20 something years in a way.
Yeah,
Where
so those songs are easy to find.
I mean, you might still have to go pull a hard drive out, but unfortunately, like pre-digital in that way, the file storage, if you will, was
Yeah.
spread across a lot of platforms. So now you have
And
to have you need a quarter-inch deck, you need a cassette deck, you need a good vinyl player, you need a functional CD player. Uh,
yeah, I have most of those.
uh,
I don't have the quarter-inch deck anymore or the half-inch deck, but
Hopefully, you don't have the DAT tape players either.
I never bought one. I always wanted one. I had a couple of DAT tapes, but then it was like they were only copies of things when I would borrow a machine once in a while. But
It's
yeah,
interesting when I was a student at Berkeley and doing the MP&E program at the time for the beginning mixing classes, we were mixing from a DAT tape as our multi-track machine, and we would print to CD. And basically, so if we're talking two digital um, kind of protocols that are no longer in a way. Yeah, but basically, we're mixing off these Tascam DA88s, and those just kind of stuck in my mind. And then I graduated the program, and remember a venue I used to play at on Nantucket called the Chicken Box. Uh, at one point, they owned several Tascam DA88s because that was what they used for some live recordings that took place at the venue.
Hmm, wow.
Some guy was like, "Hey, do you want these things? I know you just started a studio. Maybe you'll get somebody with DAT tapes, and
Oh,
you can
cool.
transfer." So I took them, and they're like, of course, these like beefy, huge, heavy things, and I had to get
Right.
them on a ferry from Hyannis or Nantucket to Hyannis, and then
Oh, that's great.
bring them home. But yeah, of course, I never encountered anyone interested in calling me to have their DAT tapes transferred to Pro Tools.
Oh, do you
Closed doors
still have?
for a while, and then a couple years ago, right after COVID, like or basically coming out of the pandemic stuff, we did like a big kind of studio purge, and we did a yard sale. So
Oh, that's right. So you sold them then.
somebody went for the DA88s then, and of course we gave them for probably next to nothing.
Right, right.
Just one
I
of
know they were like $3,000, $4,000 a machine, and then they were all of a sudden worth nothing.
it's
S-
crazy.
Same with the ADATs. It's like, oh, people turn their nose up, and now it's not worth a dime. You're like, what happened?
I know. It's so wild when, like some of the studio technology is, the dips and peaks of value are just very interesting. I mean, of course, something that's like hand built, like a Neve module or console, that's
Mm,
going to retain its value. But, um, like you said, with 3 or 4 thousand a piece, and some of this stuff, like even a 24 track tape machine back in the day, that very well could have been $24,000. And
oh, even more. Yeah.
yeah, and
I was over at Elliot Shiner's house and he had two of them. And he said, yes, they're becoming really affordable now. They're only $20,000 a piece. And then they came down so far. I was like, I was considering getting one when it was 20,000. And then when Chris Morrow was selling them for 16 or 12, I was like, yeah, maybe I'll do that, you know? And then I met you and you're like, don't do that, just use mine.
Yeah, like the things
Do you
just
remember? Do you
I
remember me contacting you? It was this machine that brought us together.
do. It was awesome too, because I think you reached out about having heard a project that I worked on that encapsulated a bunch of like acoustic instruments and woodwinds and
Yes.
bright bass drums, and basically, you kind of reached out and I was like, I recognize that name, of course. You were a professor at Berkeley. And even though I never did
Oh,
I wasn't a guitar player, but correct me if I'm wrong. Did you have something to do with the Allman Brothers Ensemble?
nope.
No? Oh, well, I thought,
Beatles ensemble though.
well, of course, Beatles. Yeah. Well, maybe that's what it was because, I know,
Like the Allman Brothers.
I know some of my friends had taken your classes and stuff, and I was like, oh, you're right down the road and you're interested in using this hibernating tape machine as well. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I know it was so cool because that album was recorded so well. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, somebody recorded something this well on a local studio. Like who's the engineer? I got to meet this person. I want to see this studio, because for the longest time, especially in the 80s, it didn't matter what the studios were in Boston. I wasn't really liking what was coming out of there. So when friends would save up money to go make a record or something, I was like, I'm going to still work at home because I have more time. I can get in there and do the detailed things I want. I'm never going to be able to get out of these studios what I can do myself because I have to explain everything to people and I won't have enough time or the budget to cover it.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that mindset is something I've shared that mindset. I think making your art it needs to be
Mhm.
a happy medium of both, right? You need to have the professional tools available to you, starting with this,
Mm.
to
Your
base,
brain.
to basically,
Starting with your brain, he pointed to.
yeah, yeah. You want to have the professional tools available to you to get the job done, but also like you know, there's a lot of factors that come into play when you're hiring out a commercial space
Mm.
or commercial engineer. So, the last thing that you really want to be thinking about or dealing with as you're going into recording an album is, oh man, this guy behind the glass is, punching the clock right now, or oh, we only have 1 day in the budget, so we have to get it all done, or something like that. Whereas the freedom to kind of come and go from the creative mindset and headspace, like one may have in a home studio, there's so much value in that.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I didn't just make that point so that I can kind of
You ever
trash
have
my own studio. I mean, we of course are.
a-
That's exactly what we do. We work with all kinds of artists on all kinds of recording sessions, and our job is to basically, what's your vision? Let's make it happen. You know, um, but I think the perfect studio would be a combination of both.
Hmm. So you mean like start a project somewhere at like a really nice studio, maybe if you can't track drums somewhere
Yeah,
in
I
your
mean,
home
I think,
and then finish it at home?
yeah, or I mean, right, when we all hit the lottery, the ideal studio would be one where, maybe it's a big barn space or something like that that has great acoustics, but also has a detached guest house, and every morning cooking breakfast to go get drum sounds.
Hmm.
I think just the ability to sort of escape mentally from the rest of the world, to just immerse yourself into the creative process is key. Doing that in sort of a whenever you want to status, like you might be able to accomplish at home, is
Yes.
great. And then,
Pretty awesome.
like I said, it goes both ways though. Of course, a commercial studio has the professional tools probably more readily available, um, and can get the job done in that way. So there's a lot of value in both.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think they're going to go away forever. I think a lot of people are going to realize, hey, it's fun to have a computer and it's fun to record into my DAW,
Mhm.
but I need help mixing or I need help mastering. And of course, they have all these plugins now that'll do things automatically, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give you what you're after. Like you still have to know what you're doing in some capacity. And if you don't, you could hire somebody to help.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to kind of like speak to that, I would say you're talking to somebody who started a recording studio in 2013, so that's 10 years ago, when everyone and their brother could go out and purchase the same number of channels as I had for recording capabilities.
Mm,
We started pretty modest as well, as far as the actual equipment inventory goes. So nothing about that was also unattainable. But essentially, I've kind of just my outlook has always been like, well, I'm not out here to compete with the home recording studio market, because those folks are going to be doing what they're going to be doing anyway, you know?
right.
And if you can't beat them, join them. Like basically, we've always been doing productions that involve some kind of. I'm not saying every project has been this way, but throughout running the recording studio, we have either been the entire project or just a piece of the puzzle. And, I'm from kind of a commercial recording studio standpoint, we're happy to have the work. Um, but also, I've never really felt as though the folks who are staying at home and creating and doing their own records are stealing kind of like business from me, or even in any kind of competition whatsoever. It's really a situation.
Yeah.
This is kind of people approaching the art and the task of audio engineering for a different purpose, whereas like I thrive in the adventure of recording, a chamber ensemble one day, a five-piece rock band the next,
Mm,
and a solo artist who, you know wants to basically work with one producer and build a sound that is greater than those two people. So
that's super cool.
yeah, you just, like I said, if you can't beat them, join them. I've always been in this strange lineup, or a timeline, I suppose, of recording technology where analog had already pretty much gone by the wayside by the time I came into recording, but was
Mm,
still pre-DAW and things like that from the home recording market, and only the big studios had that. Then there's the boom of the DAW market making it to people's homes, and plugins getting better and better and better.
mm.
Somewhere around then is completion of college and start studio, and then here we are 10 years after that, where, yeah, like you said, AI is making its way into this. And the mastering engineers I know haven't lost their jobs, the mixing engineers I know haven't lost their jobs. It's just another tool available to us. And like,
Mm.
I think it's mostly like how how dangerous can you make yourself by having your tool belt kind of be diverse.
Well, you're not just a button pusher, you're a musician.
Whoa, that
So where did that start? What instrument was first? Drums?
yeah. So, well, the first instrument was the violin in third grade, and
Ooh.
I didn't make it very far with the violin because two reasons. One, I sprained my or I broke my collarbone in third grade, so holding the violin on my left shoulder wasn't exactly gonna happen. And really, I was always like into rock bands and things like that. So I just saw the violin as an opportunity to have something with strings on it that I could turn sideways and have resemble a guitar. So yeah, I was playing the violin in my bedroom as a kid, jumping on the bed or something like that, and the bridge fell out because I was playing it like a guitar.
Oh.
So fourth grade came around, and we thought we'd give the music thing another go, and took up the drums. And then pretty much from that point until today, I still play. I did some uh, marching band, competitive marching band touring when I was like an early teenager through high school, and then yeah, did drum set as a principal instrument at Berkeley. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so yeah, and then
You play really cool grooves though too. What you played on For Another Star, and then you played recently on Make It a Party on my latest album. Uh, that is amazing. I mean, it's impeccable. The grooves are fun, the pocket is amazing, the beat feels great, but you're consistently playing it for like, 4 minutes straight, 5 minutes. Like nothing ever wavers or gets wonky. You don't have any kind of wobble in your playing. You're just like spot on amazing, and it just feels so great to play with you. I'm just so thrilled that this little machine brought us together.
yeah, thanks, I appreciate it. I mean, I think you know, I I think that the time thing comes into play just because for so many hours of my teenage years, I stood in a field with a 75-pound drum on with like a metronome blaring over a loudspeaker, and then if you kind of like move forward into my professional life, as an engineer, a lot of times we're doing something that's on the grid, on a click.
Mm,
And so, it's just I've tried to sort of see things in that sort of grid mindset. And it doesn't matter if I'm thinking about like song form or
mm.
individual kind of subdivisions or something. But yeah, I
Wow.
suppose that's where that comes from. But it's funny too because everything I just said there is like such technical jargon, whereas like really the spirit you need to be channeling like while you're playing is like our guy Ringo, and Levon Helm is another really big kind of influence of mine, and
Yeah.
those roles, unlike say maybe like Keith Moon or John Bonham of the
Mm.
kind of eras, that was showy and definitely iconic, whereas the other folks are like unsung heroes because the sum of all the parts was what it was really all about. And
How do
uh,
you channel the spirit of those players?
well, I try to just basically prioritize good groove, good pocket, and solid time in terms of tempo, speed.
And how do you describe time and pocket and groove?
Yeah. I mean, I guess if we measure without getting too metronomic with it, I think like if we measure music in BPMs, as far if we're talking about time and pocket, time to me would be how steady can you stay to that sort of metronomic tempo BPM
Mm.
throughout.
Okay.
Whereas, kind of pocket, I would say, also described as like feel, for example,
Mm.
would be, where exactly along those points do the individual notes that you're playing lie. So, for example, if you've got 100 beats per minute, and you're playing a drum groove to that, your your time depends how closely you can stay to that 100 beats per minute, even if you get dynamically different or the song moves to a chorus or something like that,
Mm.
louder or more exciting. And then your pocket is kind of where along those metronomic quarter notes of the BPM di, 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 are you kind of landing with the snare drum. And obvious trends are to try to think like hang back, and
Mhm.
that's absolutely true. But sometimes kind of knowing when to sort of push on the edge of that so that you can have the musicians around you playing a little more on their toes as well.
Mm.
Kind of a cool place to live, figure out where on that before and after scale of the time you can
Yeah.
be.
I remember starting drums at like 36 years old, having bought my first drum set. and being amazed at the spaces of the rebounds, the spaces in between the beats,
Mm.
because the spaces in between the beats on a guitar, it's like this little movement on a pick. But the space of each rebound of a hit, you can come up to a certain degree, and I could feel the rests. It was really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about it that way because like for example, if you were going to play some 16th notes at a quiet dynamic and try to go, or maybe over the course of 2 minutes, you start at the same tempo throughout and you play as quiet as you can possibly play and work your way up to as loud as you can possibly play and then back down again.
Mm,
You'll notice if you're playing the same exact speed, well, it's a lot easier to kind of get those notes when you're only lifting the sticks about 3 to 6 inches off the ground. Whereas
ooh,
if you're playing over your head, you're
yeah.
it's really significant in the same thing that you're kind of talking about there, where you begin to notice the space, and in this case, it's like physical
Wow.
space.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Wow. But then you move to upright bass.
yeah. So I was so stuck in, drumline mode. By the time I was like 14, my private drum instructor, I was taking one or two drum lesson, probably like one drum lesson a week, and also doing the drumline thing, which was probably 2.5 days out of my week. And then in the summer times, we would go on tour for 3 weeks at a time, kind of all around the U.S.
Wow.
And so by the and yeah, basically the last tour I did, we went to Australia, and that was an incredible experience. And coming
Whoa,
back,
how old were you?
I was coming into it was days before the freshman year of high school. So
Oh my.
I think I was 14, and
Amazing.
yeah, it was truly amazing. We spent 3 weeks there doing like
Oh,
showcase kind of concerts. We got to play at the Australian Parliament. We got to
wow.
teach music to kids that were in primary school there, which was so
Wow.
yeah. So it was really like life changing. And when I went to go to school, um, if you want to participate in things like the jazz band at the
Hmm.
public school system at that time, you had to be in one of the performing ensembles.
Right.
And I also played soccer in the fall time, so I didn't want to do the marching band because I had just come off of this like incredible experience, and I was also doing sports and stuff. So a friend
Hmm.
of mine said, "Hey, we need bass players in the orchestra.
Ooh.
I'll teach you to play." And I'd always kind of through that time I'd been messing around a little bit on guitar and electric bass and stuff. So I kind of saw it as a fun, exciting opportunity to learn a new instrument. And
Wow.
I've always really enjoyed being a student of music.
Yeah. It's
It's
fun to keep learning new things.
totally. So yeah, I basically started playing the upright bass. I guess it was my sophomore year of high school, and played all the way up, through graduating, a little bit in college, but I was at Berkeley, and rather than trying to sort of do two instruments during that experience, I really just focused on the drums.
Hmm.
And then I'd say probably about 8 years ago, um, I met, well, I met them prior, but friends of mine started playing some bluegrass music and things like that. And so I, noticed, hey, we've got a group of friends have a band with mandolin, fiddle, and two guitars, but there's no bass player. Well, I have the bass left over from high school and started
That's
jamming a
great.
little bit. And, that's kind of been probably
That's very cool.
more of my musical activity over the past 8 years than,
So you played guitar, bass too, and guitar,
yeah, I mean,
slew
functional.
of percussion stuff.
Yeah. When I was in high school, I recorded some music at a local studio, and there was a producer there who was the studio owner, and he was he acted kind of as a mentor. And it was one of those things where he said something to me at one point along the lines of like, if you can know enough on instruments, or you're practiced enough with your own voice that you can articulate an idea to
Mm.
their musician, um, in the recording studio, or maybe just fill in some gaps. Like if something needs an extra rhythm guitar track, um, you can kind of lay that down. It's basically the way he used to say it was like you need to be able to wear many hats. And so, yeah, m-
Mightily helpful.
I mean, I just love music, so why would I not enjoy knowing a little bit on guitar? That if nothing else, it's kind of like a dumb party trick in terms of my repertoire. But
You think I'm playing guitar, but it's actually an optical illusion.
yeah,
It's all done with nets.
totally. Or like, yeah, what are the mannequins or what are they, the puppet?
Now we could just say it's AI.
God, I don't even want to know.
When I was a kid, even playing an acoustic guitar, my grandfather would just say, "She's not really playing. There's a tape recorder inside there doing the playing." Yeah, so yeah, we had robots even back then. No, I just think it's fantastic. And then you played upright bass on my song for another star as well. So
That's
that
right.
was really fun.
Which I think, what, correct me if I'm wrong, was it not in A flat?
Uh yeah, A flat or D flat, I can't remember now.
Yeah. One of those keys that we don't really go for on the upright bass, at least in the string band context. There's definitely the jazz guys on upright are a whole nother animal, but
Okay.
I can't hang in them flat keys. B flat's okay because that's the first position you learn.
Oh, okay.
But A flat, I was like, oh man.
You did great. We just need some lowness there. Can you put some lowness there? Yeah, sure. So, when you heard that song and you knew it was an A flat, which you didn't even tell me then, um, did you think maybe I should play this on guitar bass?
Well,
Bass guitar?
it's interesting you say that because I think I'm at a point with the upright that I don't have to really actually like tag out and grab an electric. You just sort of change
Tag out.
you sort of just change the way that you think about the instrument, and for me, I just take more of an approach as though I were playing an electric. So in the case of, it's mostly, for anyone not familiar, obviously you have no frets, so your concern is intonation. And then what helps assist with that, especially in the bass where the strings are so cumbersome, uh,
Mm.
you utilize open strings almost wherever possible, at least from beginning stage to like, kind of advanced. By then, you could probably start playing pretty much everything closed. But
Hmm.
effectively, so if you start getting into these keys where like, in the key of A flat, you might have an open string at like the third scale degree or something like that. I'm not even totally sure off the top of my head. I have to think about it, but you basically you just kind of start moving into like, all right, well, if I were playing an electric bass, in terms of electric bass and guitar education, I never really got beyond like pentatonic boxes. So I just
Hmm.
thinking about like, all right, well, where's the box that I need to be in here, and sort of try to get my hand comfortable in that shape, and then you can kind of get everything you need. And from there, I think it's interesting because as a bass player, my background comes from the drums. So my primary concern is like just having something that will groove well in the context of all the other things happening.
Hmm.
Whereas somebody coming at it from either a melodic instrument or maybe a guitar player background, or even just being a bass player from the get go, might think more on a linear scale and be trying to create lines. Whereas I just kind of try to find where home base is, try to feel what the groove is that's happening, and then from there, like, begin to embellish.
Nice. Well, for whatever reason, My dad had this little tape recorder when I was a kid. It was like the size of a VHS tape, really, really tiny little reels. And it was so fun to play with this thing and the little dinky microphone that came with it. But then he was making different voice recordings of himself on this giant tape deck. This was probably like 8 inches high
Mhm.
and, the size of a, I don't know, 22, 23 inches wide, but 8 inches deep thing. This is like looking down on it.
Yeah.
That was a web core tape recorder. And then, of course, we all had these little dinky cassette machines. And this is what I meant. Every time I captured a new song, it went on one of these things. But
Well,
then we had these that we carried around to the ensemble rooms to record our project bands.
I mean, in that case, like you've got stereo cassette recorder that's got a little bit more capability as far as like
Yeah.
probably setting the mic levels and or multiple inputs and things. But
And then when I was 17, before Berkeley, I got this 4 track quarter-inch tape, this TIAC A2340. So a lot of demos and fun new songs were made on that. And then probably about 25, 26, I got the half-inch 8 track and made my first album on that.
and
And a
and
lot, few albums for some other people too.
in that case, you were probably pairing that with a mixer as well because it.
Yeah,
Yeah, there we go.
had the M35.
You did. So did you have if we hang on this rig for a little bit, did you have that board there?
I did, yeah. These aren't my machines particularly, but they were the same models. I found these pictures on the internet.
It's awesome. There's something like so classy about those kind of wood paneled Tascams, and they often came paired with the
Yeah,
tape deck that, might be an 8 track thing. I actually just
yeah, bought them together.
I kind of assisted a jazz trio recording in New Hampshire at this music retreat center, and they were up for a week doing an analog tape recording. I happened to be there the same week, but just sort of basically got them all set up to record, and they were using a similar thing. I think it was actually a Fostex rig versus a Tascam rig, but same concept. So.
Wow. Yep. And yeah, a friend of mine still has the M35. He just really likes how it sounds.
It's crazy because yeah, and that kind of stuff is coming back so strong right now.
Really, because I've written to Tascam a few times. I was like, you should get back into the tape deck building business because there are a lot of students at Berkeley that would get a kick out of playing with these things.
Well, I guess what I mean too is like from the secondhand market, not necessarily from the new
Yeah,
market, but
I
it's
want them to.
yeah, I mean if they made the Tascam 388 again, which is the 8 channel mixer with the 8 channel quarter-inch,
In
or
the whole,
maybe it just mixes down to like stereo on
right.
quarter-inch, but it's built-in tape machine into the console, and
Yeah.
people are going crazy for those things.
Well, I just love that description you were giving of all the instruments and how you got around to playing them. I think a lot of high schools do that. They make you play in all the other bands and pick another instrument if you're going to play in like the stage band or the jazz band.
Mhm.
But that's really cool. I mean, your experience is awesome because you can bring out the best in all different kinds of players. And you've recorded so many different types of ensembles and bands that like you're used to miking and getting sounds and levels for all different types of players. I'm so used to just recording myself and the way I play that recently when I had a bass player in here that was playing really hard, I didn't even think, hey, stop hitting those strings so hard. And I better do some processing on this thing, like because I never had to control my bass notes before.
Right.
It's really funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like I do wind up playing on a lot of folks' projects that come through the studio, which is,
Yeah.
you know, I have the best job ever if I get to play drums, engineer, and maybe play bass or something on a project. That's, living the dream. But it's funny in my own mind, I find where I'm like, right, if I were coming at the bass from a different brain or the drums from a different brain, how could
Hmm.
production be different? And is it advantageous to maybe not have the same person do double duty in that way, or if I'm playing the drums and mixing the drums versus what would someone else's interpretation be of
Yeah. Well, it's
drum?
infinite, and the answers to that is also infinite. There's
Yes.
really necessarily not necessarily any better or worse.
Mhm.
Did you like it? Is at the end of the day is all that matters pretty much.
Right.
Because people have said both things to me, like, "Wow, you're finally playing all the instruments where it actually sounds like different people, and it's kind of cool." And then in the early days, it was like, "It sounds like the same person's doing this everything, and that's not cool." Or, "Why did you get so and so to play? It took your tune in a whole different direction. It was better when you played it." Like so, uh, I don't know. I
I think
try a bunch of things. Sometimes I have 3 or 4 drummers play the same song, and I pick the best one, you know?
mm. Yeah, I guess the key to it too is like, there's been a few things recently that I tracked bass and drums for and kind of an acoustic instrument. This I'm working on a project with my brother where we're playing Irish music, and we did a couple sessions with a live ensemble of which we were both a part. We did some stuff that's just he and I, and one of the songs is it's actually an Irish-ish band, but they're like a punk rock kind of band. So it's more like polka, Irish polka punk rock. It had drums and bass and guitars and accordions and things on the original recording, and in this case, I played drums, bass, and the Irish bouzouki on it, and I found if I
I like that bouzouki. I saw some pictures of you playing that. Yours is flat
yeah, it's nice.
in the back. That's a nice one.
Yeah. But, I find when I'm like kind of multi-tracking myself, if I don't get too carried away with the editing and just let the human moments remain
Mm,
takes, then it does have a lot more of an organic feel. You can still kind of comp together best bits and pieces, but don't overdo it on like the takes, really just kind of what comes out um organically might be the most fun sounding.
yeah, because I can remember the first time I went to Logic and one of my students showing me how to auto tune a couple of things, and he was going through one of my vocals, and he took out everything that was me.
Mhm.
I was like, no, I don't like this vocal. I'd rather keep in the little things and the wavers and the little slides and, because that's what makes it a voice, you know? It was
Totally.
pretty funny. Um, so yeah, I hardly ever do any kind of vocal tuning. And I don't like when everything is completely to a grid. For many years, I just used Logic as a tape deck. I didn't even realize, okay, yeah, there's a grid in here and I can rely on it, you know? Then, of course, it became helpful on some songs, but
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think a lot of that production style comes into play with it. Definitely started with the DAW. I mean, prior to the DAW, you're not
yeah.
situation where you can beat detect drums or you can auto tune everything. You had to have the Antares ATR1 auto tune rack, and that thing sounded like shit. So
Or you actually had to be able to play and sing.
yeah, definitely. So
Boy,
music.
those were the days.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not saying one is better than the other, but
Uh,
basically, there's entire genres of music that are born of that
yeah,
capability. Uh,
yeah.
I worked a lot with the pop punk genre, which does require a lot of uh, drum editing, triggering, vocal stacks. All are basically vocal lined to each other, so the
Mm,
articulation is exactly the same. The tuning is near perfect. You've got
mm,
doubled guitar tracks that are wide panned that have all the fret squeaks removed, and it's very clean rock music.
mm.
But it's so interesting too because then you go see the band and it represents something else. And it's like it's almost like the live performance of that music and the album version of that music are two totally different experiences. Where I think, coming from a musician's background, I appreciate when we can retain the musicianship as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
You know?
It's also nice not to have to get in there and do all the nitpicky kind of editing because that's not as fun as capturing the live band or even blending the tracks and making things sound like the live band that you just heard when they're playing back.
Totally. I mean, I think people kind of see the other bit as mixing, but really it's not.
No.
Editing and sure we need to edit, but you don't want to get stuck down the rabbit hole of editing because
Yeah.
um, you'll just get carried away into spill over into the mix phase. And mixing really should be something that's like a hands-on faders approach, even if you're
Mm,
with a mouse. I find I've gone from putting an insert on every single track and
mm-hmm.
compressor on every single channel in Pro Tools, um, to doing so much more work with the faders,
Mm.
much less work with the signal processing. And
Yeah.
that's because I'm thinking about the signal processing at every step of the engineering phase too.
Okay.
Something's got too much low end. Well, why don't I take that microphone and back it off the singer a little bit or the guitar? Or, hey, I'm recording two instruments at once. Where can I be employing figure eight microphones so that they can be staying out of each other's way? I'm
Right.
EQing those channels on my console because they sound better that way on the way in. Why not get part of the job done now? And then
Yeah.
using a compressor when I need to basically take out an insurance policy on that track and make sure that I'm not going to clip. So it's kind of interesting, like at that point, I'm mixing while I'm tracking.
Mm-hmm.
Yet sometimes, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate with this, you listen back to something after you've put a bunch of time into mixing and soloing the perfect kick drum sound, the perfect
Mm.
sound, the perfect tom sound. You put all the pieces together, they feel more separate than they did prior. And then you scale that to the whole song. It's, whereas when you were tired at the end of a 10-hour day and just put the faders where you think they're supposed to be, and maybe you ride them as you print the bounce with the band right behind you, like I would bet that unless you've got a ton of experience, your rough mix is probably going to sound just as good.
Or better.
Yeah.
Now, you were mentioning that you really love tracking the
Mhm.
live bands and stuff. What else would you say, or is that the most fun part about engineering for you?
I think yeah, I
The
think
capture?
the capture is probably the most fun part of engineering for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I do love mixing. I mostly love when a mix comes together and really, kind of transforms from like a night and day situation or
Mm.
icing on the cake. But I think in terms of where my skill set is most valuable, and as a result, it's probably because like I pour my heart into it. But I think, yeah, as a tracking engineer or during the capture experience, because um, you know, I think audio engineering gets so lumped into software based things, but really it started with, guys in white lab coats going down the stairs into Abbey Road Studio 2 and repositioning microphones. And I just love that aspect. I love the situation where, all right, I've
Mm-hmm.
got five musicians on the other side of the glass. I'm going to go in there and, you know, put up blankets or baffles between them to isolate the players where, at least to the point where I have some freedom of control if I need to mute a sliver of a mandolin track because he played a wrong note or something.
Mhm.
or maybe we can punch something in over, but there's still bass bleeding around everybody, and you're kind of just more so engineering the sound in the room using those
Mm.
than kind of like engineering a product from a set of files.
Yeah, yeah,
It makes it sound, and I don't want to make it sound like I don't love the process from start to finish, but
yeah.
the start is the really exciting part for me, where you can really be creative. You feel like you're a part of something,
Mm.
because you are. If anything, you are in sometimes more control than you might even want. If
I
when something
think that's
goes
the real
wrong.
engineering part, though. I think putting up real musicians with real instruments, with real microphones in a real space, I think that's what it's really all about. Not that's because that's where it started, but that's where the music happens. That is the song. That is how it gets played. Uh, I know there's a whole genre of just drag and drop chords and loops and things like that, and that's kind of fun for collages and getting new ideas and writing and maybe even doing a whole album. But it's not necessarily uh, certainly not acoustic engineering, you know, and that is so exciting when it starts going down these different rabbit holes of different plugins and various things. It almost gets to be too beyond. It's like subsets of the real thing for me, and it's kind of lost its grandeur in a way. Like for a while, I was like, give me everything. I can't wait to hear, and I need to study, and I need to know." And now I'm like, like when I go back and listen to some things where I didn't even have a mixer and I just plugged right into the TAC, I'm like, some of those sound better than anything I'm tinkering with because I'm messing things up. It's like all these things and these suggestions and these videos that I've been watching. A lot of times, those techniques and tricks and tips don't even fit my songs. It's like
Mhm,
I was better off before in a lot of ways. So you go way over and then you have to tailor it back and use your wisdom and sensibilities to say what's actually musical for me.
mhm.
Has
Yeah,
that happened to you?
yeah. I think there's a lot to unpack in everything that you just said there,
Help
because
me out. What am I talking about?
no, no, I think to one point, you and I both we fell in love with our instruments, and
Mm,
we're coming at music recording and engineering from that lens. Um,
yeah.
I think about my brother is a musician, as a hobby, and when we were younger, he used to play games like Rock Band and Guitar Hero, and
Hmm.
I know in the way that he has formulated his mind around, at this stage, he plays the bagpipes, and uh,
Wow.
the bagpipes are an instrument.
Go down the block. I'll mic you from there.
Pretty much, yeah. He's always in the ISO booth, but basically, you've got a situation where it's a diatonic instrument. It's kind of got notes 1 through 9, I think. Maybe it's got like a couple of accidentals. And then you've got 2 octaves of that. So you can kind of think of it as, almost in his case, he's thinking of the holes and the dots and uh, in a way, you could almost be going back to playing something like Guitar Hero or Rock Band,
Oh,
which
wow.
is a digital production in a way, like
Mm,
those sort of drag and drop, electronic kind of based productions, and generating music in a way that is different than playing an instrument acoustically. I think we just happen to be living in the time where we're seeing, people are able to meet in the middle under the title producer, and from those 2 totally different angles.
it's crazy.
Yeah, but,
Well, they changed even the definitions. A producer now is like sort of somebody who's wearing a thousand hats. But before it was the person that just kept things in a budget, kept the band happy, made sure the arrangements worked, hired all the people, made sure everybody got paid, and got them out the door, you know?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think I kind of more embody that side of things, even though obviously I'm a a millennial age group, and kind of
Mhm.
recording has been around my entire life, so
Mm.
but yeah, it's like, I guess I probably relate more with, like, you know how George Martin would make a song,
Mm.
how Dr. Dre would sit down to make a song.
Yeah.
I like, those are probably two of my favorite people for what they each do, you know?
Wow.
Um, but yeah, it's like, I've always loved that side of it, if I could be one of those kind of audio engineers that's wearing a white lab coat and, you know,
I know people still study at Abbey Road. A couple years ago, I thought, man, I would just love to go to Abbey Road and study the real stuff, you know?
so cool.
And then I was like, oh, I don't know. Do you really want to do that? But I can remember my nephews being really young and into the Beatles rock band. And they'd go, Aunt Lauren, come on, you got to try to play this, and play the guitar part or the bass or the drums. And they'd always say to me, you're playing it too good. Don't play the real parts. Just play when the color goes by and hit the dot. I'm like, what?
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of my thing too, I'd be like, I it's funny. I loved the Allman Brothers when I was younger, and I would, you know,
Definitely.
to the instrumentals, Jessica, like, all the time. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
there's my brother playing it on
Air
Bro
guitar.
or Rock Band, and I'm like, ah, come on, they're not doing this part, they're not doing that part, and
I know they
it's,
left out all the good bits.
what would have been funny is if your two nephews were playing the video game, and you're next to them with a real guitar playing other parts. But
Well, there was the it was either South Park or Simpsons or Family Guy or one of those. They're playing. I think it was Simpsons. It was like, look, kids, I can play the real thing, and they're like, real guitars for old people.
yeah, well,
They were just playing rock band version. But
all
you were gonna were you gonna say something though about the sometimes getting lost, like in your own thoughts of or everybody else's thoughts about how you should go about doing what you do and coming back to yourself? How did you bring it back to
yeah. Well, I think, if I were to answer that, I would just say, it takes some time to learn who you are, right? Like, I think it's hard for any young person, and, hey, I'm still a young person. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up,
Mhm.
and so, who you are, sound wise, taste wise, whatever, it changes over time.
Mm.
I think it's important to know, like, who you're not.
Yeah, that's sometimes the easier part.
Yeah, and I was just listening to something I had worked on uh, just earlier today, and it's an artist who is he lives in Boston. He was originally from Nigeria,
Mm.
had a music career back home, and is kind of laying some groundwork for a music career here in the States as well. And so
Nice.
it's great because the our productions that we have done together definitely have a little more of the organic feel, whereas the stuff that he was producing previously um, had a little bit more of like a pop background. We're both the same age, we're both 34, we're both into all the great Americana songwriters of the past 60 plus decades.
Mm.
But the his previous repertoire sounds nothing like what I produce, and then uh, the music that we're making sounds different from that. But now we're thankfully at a stage where we're kind of just combining all of those tools, and
Mm.
he just released a song that was kind of a joint production between um, he and I over here, and a producer and rapper that he had previously worked with while living back home. And
Wow.
the production is like kind of a merging of everyone's talents where, you know,
Oh,
I certainly can't sit down at the computer and generate a beat. My way of doing that is by turning the drum mics on and getting behind the drum set, you know. So the cool thing about this song is it incorporated all bits and pieces of that, you know, the
hmm,
kind of laid the groundwork for some kind of electronic production, and then
that's
that
cool.
worked on, it came over to us. We did a bunch of vocal production, we did a bunch of acoustic instrument production, kind of sent it back, you
Oh,
know,
wow.
that guy then had a rapper featured on it, mixed it,
Oh,
mastered it, and it's like kind of a joint collaboration. And that's kind of what I mean when I say,
fun.
you know, like I was saying earlier, like if you can't beat them, join them. But like that's one, it's one of the beauties of the fact that we don't have to exactly like ship reels of tape across the ocean in this case to
It's awesome.
talents, you know?
Yeah. I'm definitely not against technology, AI, or anything at all because none of this would have happened. None of my studio stuff, if things hadn't become more and more affordable, and if things didn't become better for consumers to
Mhm.
buy gear that actually sounded good, I wouldn't have been able to realize any of these dreams because when I was a kid, I just knew I can play a couple of different parts of these guitar lines and parts of these songs. I wish I could hear myself playing them all together. And I would record one on one of my dad's machines and play the other one live. But, I still heard the third one and I couldn't wait to put down the three-part harmony vocals and whatever's. So I wanted people to be able to hear what I was hearing in my head. And I also wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy hearing all these parts in my head that, a dream machine would actually make it possible. And so yeah, multi-tracking in any kind of capacity on any medium that we've been talking about has just always been like, yes. It's like finally being able to see all the colors and paint with all the different objects and textures rather than just like one.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you think about it, like uh my favorite my favorite professor I had at Berkeley was Susan Rogers, who worked with Prince
Oh,
most
wow.
notably. And, you know, Prince is the perfect example of somebody that, okay, all these ideas are in my head and I'm gonna execute it by getting them all out. So let me start by going behind the drum kit and then picking up
Hmm.
bass and
And he didn't want to push the buttons, so he had her doing it.
exactly. And you know, I'm sure you know, Stevie Wonder was doing it a little bit before then and stuff.
Oh,
But
sure.
you know, it's yeah, the ability to multi-track for people like you and me who are both multi-instrumentalists and love um you know, love the process, but kind of use the process to reach an end goal, which is like the idea that's floating around in our head that features all of those instruments.
Hmm.
You know, technology innovating itself to be able to do that is
A
the only
godsend.
thing, and it's a godsend, yeah. But you know, and at the same time, don't get me wrong. I mean, I am in love with the studios that are,
Hmm.
they pride themselves on sort of being a snapshot of, you know, a ton of 60s gear and recording styles. You know, like there are several places that are like the vintage recording studio. And, you know, something
Where's
about,
that one?
well, so if I were to think of like the ones that come to mind,
Well,
they're
like
a
Welcome
great,
to 1979 is the 70s.
yeah, it's got the 70s vibe with the MCI tape machines and console and stuff. There's a studio in England called Sugar Ray's Vintage Recording Studio or something.
Hmm.
Really great documentary on YouTube that they basically outline what it was like to make recordings from the 1950s up through like the 8 track. So you had, okay, you know, so and so Elvis or somebody is making
Yeah.
a record at Sun Records, and at the time we had 2 tracks available. So he's singing into one side of the RCA 44, and the rest of the band's on the other side. And if the
I gotta
drums
watch that.
we're gonna put some baffles in front,
Yeah.
move him further away. And that's kind of what I'm saying earlier too about their mixing
Yes.
recording process.
Deciding things as they go.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they're like, and the year is now X, and we've got 4 microphones available to us, or 8.
Hmm.
And so I love
Yeah.
the places. There's another guy I know runs a studio called Big Tone Records. Used to be in Virginia, and he moved to New Orleans because there's a really great, you know, kind of 1930s jazz and horn band sound, obviously like happening there at all times, that it was kind of the perfect place for him to go if he's capturing that as a recording studio.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean,
What kind of things did you get from Susan?
well,
Why was she your favorite teacher?
I think it was just really cool to take, and we're kind of going back now. I mean, like 15 years ago or so, but
Who can remember?
yeah, but well, and it's cool because she somewhat recently released a book as well that talks a lot about her philosophy of music, and she's a brain scientist, I believe. She's
Yeah.
a PhD in music cognition, and so
Right.
really, the reason I think I liked her uh, perspective was because it was a non-musician perspective, but it was a music fan perspective.
Hmm.
She doesn't play an instrument, but she's
Yeah.
it knew what she wanted to hear and could articulate that to some of the most powerful musicians on the planet,
Hmm.
which I think one of the things I struggle with, and I'm not sure if you relate or could relate, but one thing that I have a hard time with wearing the label of producer is the fact that my opinion should be worth anything more than anybody else's opinion on the project. I'm just one opinion here. That's why I throw out a lot of ideas, and whichever ones stick, it's because they're good ideas. But it's if we were to sort of try to imagine ourselves in Susan's shoes as a music fan who doesn't know how to play an instrument, but somehow is able to work her way into the room with some of the most big stars ever, solely based on her her suggestion of what music should sound like. That's pretty cool,
How
and
did that happen?
well, I mean, it's meant to
You had to
be.
know something about the gear. I thought she was pretty good at fixing things and
I think that's basically like, I think that's how she kind of got into the engineering trade,
yeah.
which obviously was how she wound up in the room. Uh,
Yeah.
but I guess the classes that I took from her were not so much the technical side; they were more music production side, which is you know,
Thought side. Yeah.
philosophical and artistic and creative.
Yeah.
It was interesting to see somebody who was able to basically kind of get there and work with those giants in a way that it doesn't come from being a damn good guitar player or something. You know,
That's cool.
I
That's
guess
funny.
Prince would be like one there, but another funny kind of timeline too was when I was a little kid. There was a band that came out uh, when I was in third grade. It was a band called the Bare Naked Ladies,
Oh yeah.
and they had the song one week. It was on the radio, and I was like obsessed with the song because I was a little kid, third grade, and I was too afraid to say the band name Bare Naked Ladies without chuckling. It just turns out, I'm sitting in a room in college only to find out that my teacher is the one that produced the song. So
Oh, that's great. Cool. So Susan, gave you a lot of things to think about. That's very, very cool.
yeah, I guess, and that's just kind of one part of the story. I think as
Yeah.
You gotta mostly just be finding people that inspire you throughout this journey, because
Yeah.
this as a career path is such a journey that you need to constantly be latching on to people that can inspire you and can have you thinking differently about what you can be doing, because if if that's doing its job, then when you're somebody else, and if they're looking to you and you say, I have an idea, you know, then this is the way that it's kind of, at the risk of sounding so cheesy, the gift that keeps on giving.
Well, that's good.
It's like a
Who are
creative.
some of your favorite producers or engineers? Now that the lines are so blurred, they're mixing and producing and arranging and
Yeah. What's funny is I not that I would have too hard of a time answering that, but I I should say that I am very bad as far as you
well,
know,
only if someone's inspiring you, you would know off the top of your head, but you don't have to go digging for things.
yeah, totally. I mean, I think there are people like all across the decades that I would be inspired by.
Yeah.
I would say, like, if we're talking like um, some of the people I idolize engineering wise, Rudy Van Gelder. I think it's so cool that this guy was an optometrist in New Jersey and a side hustle recording studio out of his eyeglass practice, and he wrote
Wow.
Kind of Blue. I mean, come on, so
Who has he done? Because I haven't heard the name, I don't think, but I probably heard the work.
a lot of the Blue Note era jazz recordings. So John Coltrane, Miles Davis, Bill Evans, Elvin Jones,
Wow. Yeah.
like 50s, like kind of cool era jazz. Uh,
Everybody pile into one room around one microphone jazz.
yeah, yeah. Or, I think in the case of like Kind of Blue, is like they were able to separate everybody into different rooms, but
Hmm.
he's definitely still sitting there with the tube console with the knobs and twisting the knobs
Four
versus,
faders and
I suppose, if just to keep going, if we're then going to talk about one of my other favorite engineers, we have to talk about Tom Dowd, because
love Tom Dowd. Yeah.
basically took the knob concept of blending sound, and he said, well, I want to be able to do this with my 8 fingers.
Yeah. Give me those faders.
Your fader, yeah. and
Yeah.
you
We
know
don't want these rotary knobs.
and he produced the Allman Brothers, so that was
Yeah.
my favorite band.
And so many cool Clapton records. And God, oh my God.
There's a great movie called Tom Dowd. I think it's like The Language of Music.
Yeah, I have it.
The intro is
Awesome.
they're panning in, and he's sitting there at the console, and it's the beautiful piano excerpt from Layla.
Layla. Yep.
And then all of a sudden you hear the tape stop. You run it again. And he's
That was a perfect sound too.
Dowd, Rudy Van Gelder. There's a guy named Eric Valentine that
Oh yeah.
he has
Eric's super cool.
audio, but I think the in my opinion, one of the best drum sounds I've ever heard on a record is the Third Eye Blind album,
Ooh, okay.
titled album, and he was the engineer on that. He also engineered "Hey Now, You're a Rock Star," right? So
Yeah. This is Eric.
this is all Eric Valentine. He also did a group called Nickel Creek, which is all these pretty iconic, uh,
Right.
say bluegrass musicians, but basically they wanted to do something different with their sound
Hmm.
to him, and that record sonically is very cool. Um, and outside of that, of course, I love Rick Rubin. He seems to be really
Hmm.
available in a way now, where if I'm sort of seeking some insight, he's got a great podcast. He's got a book out. He did the
His book was cool. Yeah.
Hulu special with Paul McCartney, so you
That
can
was fun.
get a perspective on his brain. But I think I try to kind of think locally with my engineering brain and just be inspired by like some of my friends that are in this
Oh,
because
wow.
those are the records that I'm listening to, you know?
Mm.
Might be a
Well, you've
band.
definitely inspired me. That's why I was like, I got to reach out and know you.
Look, it's a two-way street here because I just admire your ability to come into engineering and just be so immersed into like space, the equipment, your passion for it all is it excites me, you know.
I was always saying to fellow artists that are as crazy as you and I are, like, it's amazing to be us. And then Rob Jasko said, it's amazing to be you. You know, it's just like, I think he meant you're crazy spending all this money or whatever. But, you just have to have fun with the stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and it can be a revolving door if you find that, you've got a piece of gear that's maybe worth something, maybe it's not worth something, and if it's
Mm,
floor space and you're more inspired to jump into a different aspect of the craft, then nothing wrong with something moving along and making room for something else in your arsenal because ultimately, you know, I'm at a
we've all done
stage.
that.
Yeah, I mean, like I more greatly appreciate a really talented engineer than um the gear that they might be using, you know?
Right. But haven't you found that to a certain point, it's like the gear doesn't really matter. It's like you know what you're doing or you don't. And then all of a sudden, a particular couple of pieces of gear make a huge difference just because they're super quiet and have like a super low noise floor, like this Audient. But they have the same preamps and noise floor, beautiful, quiet preamps in everything they make. So
Mhm.
you don't have to buy a giant Audient console to get that kind of quiet that sounds so hush and like professional.
Totally,
But
totally.
then, of course, there's the tube based gear that has a personality. And a lot of that you really can't, uh, like get away from the fact that it gives something wonderful. Although then you can compare it to tape or compare it to plugins, and sometimes you really can't even tell the difference. Some of these things are getting so close and so good.
Yeah, I mean, it's all in the operator, you know? I think with situation where, not to make another kind of music metaphor, but if I were to pick up Jerry Garcia's guitar and play on his rig, I'm not gonna, whereas if Jerry
That's
Garcia
true.
picked up my Fender Stratocaster, he would sound like Jerry Garcia.
Hmm.
And when he moves over to his rig, he sounds just like Jerry Garcia because he's been able to.
He is Jerry Garcia.
Yeah, or, maybe he's responding to the idiot like, small detail of the way the tube amp is responding to his touch, you
Yeah,
know? Engineering is the same, I think, like, the
it
reason why
really is.
I go to Chris Lord Alge or something to mix is because he knows how to respond immediately to something happening in his room and with the tools because he's spent a lot more time doing it, but it doesn't
Mm.
I own all that same equipment, I'm gonna have the ear that he has.
No, it's a good point. And you don't have the any of us wouldn't have the same sensibilities or the same sense of touch or the whole life journey that brought him there, you know?
It's like it's not only is it the tool that's in front of you, but it's everything that got you to the point of that tool in that moment, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. But no, it's a great, great description of that whole phenomenon because it's the same with any instrument, you know,
And it's like the unpopular
sense of touch.
the less sexy choice here is like just use the tools that you already have available to you to develop and get better to the point where then when somebody puts something more powerful into your hands, you can take it so much further.
Yeah.
believing that's the key to your success.
Absolutely.
Rather
Absolutely.
have 457s and have to learn how to engineer
Yeah.
and go through like the trials and tribulations versus, not having that experience, having, for Neumann's instead. But, why does everything sound so bland or flat and I think that's kind of where like a lot of times if I'm trying to continue learning, I have a hard time when I'm seeing a mix breakdown of a song or, you know, um, if somebody's saying, here's how we're going to produce something in the style of Fleetwood Mac, for example.
Mm,
Like the music itself it's just basically kind of a placeholder as something that's similar, but not really inspired in the same way. So we're just, as John Mayer would say, like it's like learning somebody else's guitar solo is like playing yesterday's lottery numbers. The numbers aren't good anymore, we should learn how to do the job, but rather than kind of focusing on chasing some Fleetwood Mac approach, you probably would be better off just kind of using your own imagination of how they might have gotten that, and whatever you wind up with is
right. Keep
be a
experimenting.
new idea.
But I don't know if in earlier days, let's say Abbey Road engineers or even the Beatles sitting around saying, "Hey, try to get that bass sound off that blues record. You know, that Motown thing is so great." I don't know if they're trying to say imitate that engineer, but in a sense they are. They're like, "Just give me more bass." And they couldn't get enough bass on those early records. So I'm not sure I agree with John Mayer in that sense because especially for a guitar player, they have to learn the vocabulary somewhere,
Totally.
right? So, like, if we didn't learn how to talk by someone giving us the language one word at a time, we wouldn't even be able to think, let alone walk or whatever else. So, you have to copy people just to learn how to get a good noise out of whatever you're trying to play, and
Totally.
then your own personality will give you new ideas. You won't be a clone. I don't think. I think people worry about that way too soon. It's like you are yourself. Just learn how to play. You know.
Yeah, totally. And I should say the context in which I heard him say that specifically was a interview with Rick Rubin on Rick Rubin's podcast, where his sentiment there was trying to do verbatim,
Oh,
where
for himself. If he
yeah,
came out and played his own solo over and over again?
or more so if he really focused on um, maybe learning note for note how Stevie Ray Vaughan had done X, or is he better off learning Stevie Ray Vaughan's vocabulary and then trying to speak on his instrument using that vocabulary?
Yeah. He's already more advanced, that's why he can say that, yeah. That's cool. No, I like a lot of what John Mayer says about music, and I was so happy when he made it because a real musician was actually getting some notoriety, you know?
Totally, totally.
Yeah. Not just a pretty face. So, what would you say is inspiring you these days with your gear or with what you're doing, who you're doing it with? What aspect of all the recording stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm still inspired by capturing ensembles and
Mm,
acoustic environments and trying to find ways to engineer solutions, like I think one cool part of ensemble recording is you're almost looking at the problem and then devising a solution.
mm.
This is maybe just, and I guess to sort of elaborate on that, I say like, all right, the problem is we have 6 musicians in the room and 12 microphones that we're gonna have to do something with. Well, how can we you know, create some synergy here? Well, if I'm using a figure 8 and I put this person in the null point, then that works to my advantage to
Mhm.
solve this problem come the mix phase. If I put a baffle between these two people, that solves the problem of now I need to do a punch in on this instrument.
Mm.
And then of course the like kind of hospitality problem of okay, folks, let's make sure everybody's like calm, relaxed, doesn't see me stressed about, why is channel 7 giving me a crackle.
Mm.
It's kind of like it's almost like a controlled fall the whole time.
Yeah,
Manage
that's
control.
great.
And I kind of like that those days. I'm very
That's
enjoying.
exciting stuff for you.
Exciting. It's
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
problem solving and
but I am also kind of I'm inspired by changing my outlook on how engineering should take place as well. Like at this point, Wachusett recording is where I still do 99% of my engineering, but I'm also beginning to branch out, maybe not 99, but you know what I mean. The vast majority of my work is done in a space that I've kind of tweaked and controlled in that way, but I'm beginning to do more outside of that space. And my goal with that is just trying to bring one consistent piece of gear, which is like my brain and my ear.
mm,
I I hope kind of like spirit, and put my heart into it. That at that point, like the other day I recorded a saxophone overdub at a lake house in New Hampshire. About a year ago, I had recorded an album at like kind of a cabin retreat up in Maine.
mhm,
I've done a bunch of sessions at the record company in Boston when we might have a more tight time window and people are living in the city and it's just easier than
mm,
like a studio day. And there's a space up here in New Hampshire that I'm beginning to work with as well about like some kind of more classical recording. And I think, you know, the confidence of like, well, the same engineer is behind all of this. What are my values? And, values not so much in what I'm bringing to the table, but the things that I hold true to and important to myself.
nice. But
That's like,
bringing your whole artistic self,
yeah, I think that's
it's
like
awesome.
something that I'm currently inspired by, because it's writing itself in a way.
Well, that's what a lot of the brain trainers and the entrepreneurs that teach people how to be successful entrepreneurs are always talking about. It's like step into your own celebrity, step into the fact that nobody else on the planet is you with your set of values, with your set of skills, with your sensibilities, with your artistic loves and your intentions and your full self. When you put in your heart and soul, it's completely different than someone else. And people get attached to that, or they start to like the flavor of who you have become, that kind of thing. Then they want you, they want to hire you and only you. If you make it that clear, if you're able to express all those things in such a way and then make some kind of demand for it, that's awesome.
Right.
That's why some people get so in demand.
It's interesting you use that word too, because I don't I guess, it's always really hard. It doesn't matter if you're looking at this from like an artist standpoint or from a professional standpoint. It's really hard to be like your loudest cheerleader, you know.
Mm,
Kind
but
of
we have to be in the beginning because nobody knows who we are.
well, I would even go as far as to say we have to at all stages of our career because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you're starting out or if you're, you know, 40 years into it. I think if you don't care more than anyone else in the world, then, you know, nobody's going to come alongside of you and say, "Hey, let's take this thing for a ride and let's bring you to fame
Mm,
or the next phase of whatever your career is." It's really something that like at all stages, like you have to be behind it and you have to be directing
hmm.
yourself and inspiring yourself too.
Yeah.
Not always easy. I know a lot of musicians that throw the word like imposter syndrome around, and that's one good way to sort of like label it. But you know, just really knowing that like if you're willing to push yourself and advocate for yourself and things like that, you can create a demand.
Hmm.
You need to do it behind some veil, like in the case of um, musicians with like a band name or a solo artist name or something that
Mm.
insert. Or I know one thing that helped me really get the experience I have as an engineer was I was advocating and creating a demand for a recording studio. Now, anytime somebody booked the recording studio, I was the engineer. So then I
Yeah.
build upon all these experiences that now create my engineering portfolio, if you will. But
Nice.
but that's, for me, it was easier to create a demand that way than to create a demand for Michael Harmon, engineer, producer. Although
Oh, I see. Yeah.
it's kind of happening by osmosis then as well.
Yeah. But you're also able to like think up an idea and then knock on a door or pick up the phone or email somebody and initiate some kind of a collaboration as well. Like you were telling me about the new place that you're talking to now. Um, a lot of people are pretty shy, maybe with that imposter syndrome, and they're also out of practice because of the pandemic and stuff. And in a lot of ways, a lot of us are bored and we're out of touch and we're hungry for engagement, so if we can all get a little bolder or a little bit more interested to reach out to somebody that we'd like to talk to or be a part of something that they're doing or invite them to be a part of something we're doing, it's really going to help stir the pot a little bit because things have gotten quite stagnant. And so many people I've been talking to are like, yeah, we really got to start doing some things together to have some artistic hangs. And this has been great because we've been so lonely. I'm like, oh, okay, great. Happy to have written to you to ask you to do it.
That's the thing too. It's like, yeah, it sounds like in that case, it might be unclear on like who plants the seed, but once the dialogue's open, then
Yeah, who doesn't matter. But if everybody's in that position of I'll wait to be asked to be polite, you
yeah,
might still be waiting. And it's interesting that you talked about how there are lots of things about ourselves that we don't see. Like someone was just saying to me, you don't realize how cool these conversations are because you wear so many hats and you're able to keep conversations going and actually ask questions that matter to you, but they're mattering to a lot of people. They're really interesting conversations. And I'm going, we're just talking to people. It's no big deal. And so much of what we all do, we think is no big deal. But inherent in each person is a whole batch of skills and experiences that make them unique and make them valuable and helpful to other people.
yeah, like everyone's their own patchwork quilt. Somebody once said to me in the context of music, and uh, in this case, they're referring to like what makes up an individual musician's kind of overall career.
Mm,
Patchwork quilt of various gigs, and various stages and maybe moments of significance. But yeah, I think you have to be able to take some initiative to get out there and knock on someone's door. Some that's
yeah,
maybe seeking advice. To others, that might be more of a I'm gonna shoot my shot here and see what happens. And
sure.
like I love the Wayne Gretzky quote of "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." Um,
Mm, true.
kind of find myself in these situations throughout life where I'm like looking at what I'm actively working on, whatever the project may be, and just saying like, "What the heck? How did I get myself into this?" But it's like one of my talents, I suppose, in that case, is being able to talk my way into that situation.
Well, before when you were talking about setting up the studio and such, should I use a baffle? Should I use a ribbon mic, the null points and such. I don't know if you heard the story, but when me and Mike Bishop came to watch you recording and you were playing drums and recording bass and drums while I was listening on my song Love for You, Mike missed one of the chromatic notes that I needed. He kept playing a D and I needed a D sharp when I went to the diminished chord. And I might have just thrown in an extra chord on that version because he wasn't practicing in that spot to remember to put in that note. So he said, anytime I practiced with, even when you gave me the rough mix, I couldn't figure out what note I could play there. And then I went in and tried to change the pitch and it still wasn't working because I hadn't set up the session. I had forgotten that you had mic'd the bass amp. He wasn't just going direct.
Right.
So the wrong note was in all the drum mics too. No matter what note he and I were trying to think about that could work there, nothing was going to work because the wrong note was still there. And we just got such a big laugh out of that.
But yeah,
You would have thought of that instantly, but it took me a couple of seconds. I'm like, what's going on? Oh.
I mean, it might have taken me a moment too, but
But
yeah,
you had set up the session, so you probably would have realized, well, the bass is here too.
I mean, it's good to. I suppose nothing. None of us are perfect, so you still encounter those situations like at all stages of your career, right? And they
Yeah.
were far more frequent when I was getting going. You didn't know what problems to avoid yet because you hadn't encountered them yet,
Mm,
which is, in my opinion, a big part of audio engineering.
I know. Figuring out what to do.
So much engineering is just how good are you at troubleshooting and signal flow and
Yeah.
problem and immediately finding a solution, even if the solution to the problem is a workaround, you know?
That's what Glenn Berger was saying about the mind and thinking and personality and troubleshooting your own life. You know, it's like he said, you're an engineer, you're used to troubleshooting. So, of course, you would be thinking in terms of troubleshooting how we think and how we're going to do things. But a lot of people don't, they don't think they can change something. It's like, this is how I am. That none of us are how we are and we can't change, when it comes to a new thought or a new way of working or a new way of thinking, especially something to up level our lives. That's a really cool word, troubleshooting. But I would like to get back to when you were talking about mixing as you went along. I've always done that. But now with plugins, I'm doing too much, So if I have 14 vocals and every time I put another one or two on, I'm high passing and low passing and EQing and doing whatever, by the time I get to the mix stage, it's like I could have just done a stereo bus and done it once. Like some things become redundant in too many plugins. Do you
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
a workaround for that you normally go like? Sometimes people are saying you're mixing and doing too much too soon. Like, why don't you just track and then mix and then even open up a new session to master or a new session even just to mix?
Yeah. I think there's always like some combination of all the things, right? Like I'm obviously trying to shape the sound on the way in during the count.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely applying tools and techniques during the mixing phase. It's mostly just knowing where not to get carried away. I think it's a lot easier to
That's good.
stop production. I mean, one thing I think that has hurt every amateur musician's mindset, that like you've heard the phrase knows enough to be dangerous.
Right. Right.
Nowadays with music and music recording, many musicians know enough to be dangerous about how a record could be made, not necessarily how records are made.
Mm,
On top of that, their perspective comes from, well, I own this software at home. So when I'm doing this and I'm doing this in my free time and have all the time in the world, the equipment is already an investment. And now this is just kind of, at home production. Doing 100 guitar takes doesn't mean that you're going to have a better outcome. It just means that it's going to take a guy like me 100% more of the time to go through it all and find the good stuff. Whereas if
Wow.
you know your instrument and you know your part and you learn what you're supposed to do before you come into the studio,
Hmm.
that's the most effective way. And of course, I'm not saying that everything needs to be so like methodically um, plotted out. Of course, you can still leave room for improvisation and stuff, but that
Yeah.
just come at a time where you know that whatever is going to present itself at that time, you're 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 improvising a guitar solo that maybe you already have a concept for, or the nature of the solo is going to be a more free, open thing, whereas
Hmm.
a gap in the plan is different.
Gap in the plan. Especially if people are paying. It's
Yeah,
interesting that they take that much time when they're paying. You know, like sometimes I really just want to push the buttons and I'm the engineer and someone comes over to play something for me and they haven't had a chance to listen to the song or work out anything. And they're saying, well, how do you work out your parts? I said, I just play it a lot and play along. It's like, well, that's what I'm doing. It's like, oh, right, of course, but I'm like ready to capture it and it's not ready. They don't have it to play for me yet. So I have to sit through all their figuring it out, which is okay because that's what I do for myself. But like I'm embarrassed for them sometimes, like I wouldn't do that at someone else's studio. I'd go in with a bunch of ideas so that I wasn't messing up terribly.
yeah, and I mean that comes from like we've been on both sides of that. We've been at
Mm,
the writing table, and then we've been in a studio that's been both fast moving and slow moving. Uh,
yeah,
we've kind of formed our own opinions about like how we would come into this situation. But a lot of times, it might be somebody's first go, or
right.
they don't have as much of a musical background, so um, they're sort of reliant on some magic to present itself. Sometimes which might come from the engineer just being good at their job. Uh, but
Mm.
yeah, I mean, I think just having a pretty good understanding of how the house is going to be built as far as you don't want to really have a situation where you don't have
Mm,
foundational bits all figured out. Whereas by the time
yeah.
you paint on the walls, if you want to improv that aspect, then
Well, what haven't we talked about that you'd like to get in there before we close out?
yeah, nothing in particular. I mean, I think like I I appreciate the opportunity to just talk about the creative process as it relates to the recording studio. It's just something that, you know, um, there's many ways to skin a cat, and
Mhm.
you and I at least have the same philosophy and are inspired by many of the same things in terms of how and why we got into this madness. But yeah, I think, just the opportunity to just sort of riff on that
I know
is
it's a lot of fun.
for me.
Well, it's so much fun for me. I'm still amazed that we're such good friends, and it's always great to see your smiling face. It makes me think of some of the teachers I've talked to in MP&E who are so surprised that students are taking MP&E as a major who just want to record themselves. They're like, why would anybody do that? And it's funny, but of course, people want to get better at doing their thing. So now they're coming up with even new classes to say this is just for the person who wants to write songs and not necessarily record everybody under the sun, which makes me think of what does each person actually really want to do? Like some of the engineers I've spoken to say, well, I'd like to record some more of my music. I haven't had a chance to write enough of my own songs and record my own records. I've just been recording slews of people all over the world, or uh, Maybe it's the opposite. Somebody is writing songs all the time and spending tons of money in a recording studio. And now they want to learn a few recording tricks so they can get some of it done on their own. What are some of the things that are still goals for you that you're saying, I would like to spend more time on this side of the project?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that question because that's something that I feel like I'm trying to sort of take an inventory of right now in my professional career and decide, okay, well, what do I want to do? Not what do I want to do next, but
Mm,
way do I want to steer the ship um,
yeah.
for whatever the next phase would be. And what's interesting is there's something I've said kind of mostly just to myself, but I've mentioned a few times to like people close to me and stuff is like I almost would always rather, if as far as engineering goes, be it in the recording studio or a live context, certainly in a live context, I've always said, well, I'd rather be behind the drums than behind the faders. Um, and I've kind of
That's
always
good to know.
that way in the studio as well, like I love getting into the live room and playing my instrument or things like that, um versus doing the same thing maybe for someone else, unless that someone else is someone that I'm able to listen to and learn from, you know.
Yeah.
So what's interesting to me is like I've kind of got like my musician goals because I still actively play all the time, you
And
know.
perform live everywhere too.
Yeah, but then, I've got my engineering goals too. And interestingly, as far as those go, it speaks to a lot of the things we were saying about where I feel challenged and where I thrive on that challenge is like ensemble recording.
Mm,
Goal I would like to start doing is sort of stripping back even more of the tracks and microphones available to me. And I would like to record larger ensembles in
with
large
less mics.
with less control, you know? Uh,
Yeah.
I think what it does is it like speaks more to like my core value of like why I got into this. I got into this because of the music, not because
Mhm.
gear. And I do love the gear, but
Mm.
I would love to record an orchestra, you know?
Yeah. Wow. That's very cool.
Sort
That's
of,
good to know because then you can start programming your reticular activating system to bring about that situation, you
yeah,
know?
you start steering the ship.
Yeah. Because a lot of times I've noticed over the years, um, so I have another 30 years over you, is that if I don't have a thought or a dream or something I'm working towards, everything seems to stay the same. But as soon as I say, "Hey, I would love that piece of gear," or "I'd love to play in such and such a situation. I wish I would be recruited for," all of a sudden these things start to line up. So the universe is in this particular situation where it's like we're here to focus and to dream and to bring ourselves someplace. And very often, if we think nothing's happening and it's same old, it's because we don't have a desire. We're not following anything or putting even a inclination out there to say, wouldn't it be nice if I could just, that's kind of impossible, but it would really be fun if I could just, and even just having that thought to just decide on something, just name something, you might find yourself getting a little closer to it or looking for it. And then rendezvous happen and magic happens and all that kind of thing. So it is nice to kind of jar our brains and ask what is next because again, entrepreneurs do that all the time. Set new goals and reach them.
You just took the words out of my mouth. What's next? I have I kind of, as far as my engineering and studio career goes, it's greatly inspired by the entrepreneurs in my life who have nothing to do with music. They're
Mhm.
inspiring because of their entrepreneurial spirit and experience. And one of them um, said that he was most inspired, someone who most inspired him in that path had said on their dying deathbed, said, "What's next?" And that's what he applies to his entrepreneur, and it's like so true, you know? It's like if you
Mhm.
if you're not
Don't lose your hunger.
yeah, if you're not chasing the carrot, what are you doing? You know? And I think the more that you diversify, there's always going to be some carrot that inspires you. I mean, like I should and do sit behind the drum kit, but if I could basically put myself in a situation where I can be chasing just specifically a drumming carrot, maybe it's every morning waking up and studying the Alan Dawson book or something like that.
Right?
That's that's like a that's something that excites me and inspires me, and that's a carrot that I would be chasing. And then same goes
Mm,
engineering. If I'm trying to do what I do, but do it in a way that sounds better,
right.
it's like, yeah, the more that you can find those things to almost obsess over, the more you get bored, you know?
You're definitely not bored. Yeah, you just get right in there and it just starts percolating and it's a really great feeling. It makes you feel alive. You're looking for the spark in everything all the time, and I think it's one of the things I love about you is that you were very warm and open when I reached out to you, and maybe it's because of your Irish background and the falcha. But I felt very welcome to come visit you and hang out. And then we did some recording. And we've been doing different collaboration things ever since. So I'm always looking forward to more too.
Yeah, no, it's really important to that note, it's really important to have like a buddy in all of this. And it's
Yeah.
like I think specifically the engineering thing, it can be um I've never really felt as though it's competitive or cutthroat, but I know that maybe other people's perspective wouldn't be the same. Maybe they would find that trying to reach out to peers and things like that, somebody might say, like in the back of their mind, like, is this person trying to steal a gig from me or what? I've always felt as though like the engineering community is like really supportive of what I do and
That's great.
continuing to learn and then like making these friendships and connections and stuff. But it doesn't mean that it always like presents itself in an organic way. And the way that you and I came together certainly was just like
Mm,
we're also into all of these same things and kind of take a similar approach. And we both can obsess down the rabbit hole of like a console, but at the same time, like, the break from that can be a conversation about music. And that
yeah.
it's you don't you need those people because that's what helps keep you going and help kind of give you the confidence to be the patchwork quilt that you are.
Yeah, I sure need it. And you've been very inspirational to me. So thank you so much.
Likewise.
What's next?
What is
Dinner.
this? Yeah, yeah, of course. So, yeah, no, I mean, I've, I'm just kind of working away on some projects. I'm doing some guerrilla style engineering because my wife Emily and I have just moved up to New Hampshire from Massachusetts, and we're kind of developing some partnership with a space up here, as well as trying to incorporate some type of recording space in my home as well, so that I can kind of try to blur the lines between, you know, when you need to be in the creative mindset and when you're separated from it and commuting to a recording studio and stuff like that. You might be super inspired on the ride over, and then you get there and you're just obsessing over like floor hasn't been swept in a week. But yeah, like I just
Yeah.
kind of change up some of the approach and learn more about the craft and really just kind of looking at it that way than
Mm,
needing the craft to always exist under the same four walls.
yeah.
Kind of what I'm exploring right now.
That's fun. And new setups are interesting, and remembering that it's all inside you and you bring it. whether you're just using a little interface and a couple of mics, it's still inside you. So yeah, that's cool. And you're doing all this remote stuff. I've noticed a lot of times you've got like video things going and audio things going at the same time, and you've been a very good guest because you do that work. You're not clunking things around when you talk and hitting the desk, and there's so many things you sometimes have to edit out of the podcasts because someone doesn't do any recording or video editing and they don't realize how fidgety they are in a noisy way.
Apologies in advance.
No, you haven't. If anything, I haven't. I've been muting, like just to shift. Don't make the chair squeak. That's great. But where's the trident going to go? Is eventually going to come up to you in your house?
No plan for any kind of movement of
Not yet.
no. Basically, Wachusett recording is a somewhat autonomous thing, and there's more value in that than kind of stirring that up in any way.
Oh, okay. So it's going to stay.
Well, I mean, I suppose there's always like we're we're always open to. I'm all ears for any ideas as far as one way or another, but
Yeah.
mostly it's concerning myself more so with laying like a personal groundwork um, as a professional, and like I kind of said earlier, like it's not really about the tool, it's about the individual. And
Mm.
so if that physical piece of equipment needs to move around at some point, then we can aim for that. But otherwise, I'd like to create more of an experience where in my new home, there is going to be sort of space that's dedicated towards me as a musician. And even if that only gets used more for my own personal projects, that's one thing. But
Yeah.
between that and the acoustical space down the road that has a 9-foot Steinway that I can go in with some microphones and do the remote thing, or going back down to Wachusett recording to do studio days and stuff like that.
Mm.
I'll be busy enough,
That's cool. Yeah.
things,
Awesome.
develop more or less into one of their own categories, then we'll do what we got to do to make it happen. But
Yeah.
mostly just
That's
psyched
all great.
about the fact that this is what I get to do.
Fantastic.
Well, in some ways, I have to do it. I have to make a living, but we get to make a living.
The way we want to.
Doing, yeah, a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so awesome. Well, this has been great, just like all our visits.
Well,
We'll do it again. We'll do it again.
no, it's great every time we just get to shoot the shit, and it's they're we're gonna be able to even go back and reflect on it. Whereas every other time, we just there's been no red light happening, and
And
we
we could go on forever.
have even paid no mind to some genius $1 million idea in the past that we already had that was just over like that. It's
Do you
just
think
like
we've had one?
good to go back and take a look. I mean, it's to come full circle on the conversation. It's like the cassette tapes in the other room. It's like, did you ever go and take a listen back and see if there's any gems in there?
Oh, I love the songs that are in there. I know which ones they are, and I pilfer them all the time. Either finish an idea that's just remember the little piece, or I, recut the song, and they get released eventually. So
Especially since like the hardest part is finishing the song.
yeah, I love that. Yeah, and keep writing new ones. So that's usually the hardest part is just deciding what goes on the next one. These days, people are just doing singles. I just don't like the idea of paying so much for each one to get uploaded. I rather upload 10 or 12 at a time because it's less expensive
Yeah,
since
I
we
mean,
don't make much money on any of them anyway. Why spend so much to get them out there?
And there are like certain distributors or sort of like account
Yeah, unlimited for a yearly subscription and
exactly that kind of thing. But I think to your point too, probably not the only reason. I think it's also like that's the appetizer, you know?
yeah, and I like the concept of a record, even though most people are maybe not listening that way. But I also like trying to master them together so that they sound like they belong together. Whereas if everything's individual, who knows? And some of those distributors make you keep paying. So as soon as you decide to close your account, all your stuff comes down off the internet. So I don't want that either. I want to keep it up there.
Yeah. And I think it's like on the creative end too. It's like a situation where um it's more of a macro look than a micro look at where you're at creatively over the span of whatever time it took to complete the work, like if an album is a snapshot of where someone's at creatively, inspirationally, and you know, content wise, for a moment in time, then like you said, you try to release an album every year,
Mm,
album from 2022 is going to sound different than your album from 2016 or something, or versus
yeah.
1980.
Keep growing as an engineer, they get better.
Exactly. And an album is a cool way to sort of like measure that, whereas songs are the appetizer.
Yeah. When I was talking to Steven Weber, he was saying, hey, listen, when Elliot Shiner was working with uh, uh, Moondance,
And Morrison.
yes, thank you. He said he was 19 years old when he recorded that. He said, you know more as an engineer now than he did at 19. I was like, what? I don't know. I don't think so. He's going, oh, definitely.
Cool examples of that though, like
I'm
uh
like, well, Moondance is a pretty amazing record. I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe it just shows how amazing Elliot Shiner always was at doing all this stuff that, you know, like you were saying, with somebody who knows the gear or does things their own way, anybody can come in here and get a completely different sound because they're doing things their way. But
right.
it could be, you know, not necessarily the way one of us wants it to be for our song. So yeah, it's such a moving target.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that too. Not to kind of keep going down more conversations here,
We're
but
never going to be able to stop. No,
my wife
keep bringing it back.
we're remodeling a house. It's like from the 1850s, and we're doing all this crazy work to it. And basically, the other day, I
Wow.
was down in the basement, sweeping out all the cobwebs and stuff, and really terrible cell service there. So the only music I could throw on was stuff I have saved on my phone.
Mm.
And there's a Wachusett recording Spotify playlist of it's almost up to like 1,000 songs
Oh, that's awesome. I got to go there and check it out.
yeah, and basically, it's cool because I'm not taking credit for all of that. There are other engineers that have come in and freelanced projects there, and then
Sure.
studio partner Roger LaValle, does a lot of work, and we oftentimes are like ships passing in the night, where like we see each other as I'm coming out of a session, he's going in. Um, has the exact same gear, the exact same space all the time, but our two things sound completely different. So it was
Wow.
always interesting when something would come on and it's, maybe incorporates drums and I engineered it, or maybe I'm playing them or something like that. And then I would hear something that Roger's done and it's like, oh wow, this sounds completely different. And then I would hear something that I'm playing drums, but Roger was the engineer and wow,
Oh,
listen to
wow.
the sound he's able to get out of me from his perspective versus the sound that I pull from, me playing the drum. And it's the same drummer.
Yeah.
Interesting
And
thing.
it's not
But
just miking it different ways. There's so many other factors.
yeah, I mean, if anything, we probably mic'd it almost exactly the same way because, you know, they're helping him plug in as well. So
Do you think you play differently when you're not engineering yourself?
I know that I can more more so immerse myself into the creative options.
As a player.
Yeah, because it's one less job to do if I don't have to.
Yep.
So then I can basically separate and say, all right, well, like he's got that. So now I can just be the drummer of the band. And
Nice.
that's why like the band that I do play with, we do hire a producer slash engineer for when we go and make an album, even though we record them at my studio, it's so that I can just be the bass player and focus on
Nice.
the arrangement and the music and things like that and not have to be trying to track down the buzz that everybody's now getting in their headphones.
Why? Oh god, that's funny. Well, it's always great to see you, Mike. Thank you so much for jumping on this thing.
Thank you very much for having me. This is great.
I will let you know when we're up.
Cool.
But I would look forward to more music and more hangs and wish you all the best. I think you're super creative and you got a million cool things going on, and I'm just excited to hear about them.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah. And likewise, can't wait to hang. Can't wait for the next project.
Yeah, you're the best.
Alrighty. We'll see you soon.
Take take care.